Hi everyone, my name's Achyut. I'm one of the consultants in acute medicine and one of the ADMEs with responsibility around IMG welfare. I'm joined by Babar, who will be introducing himself shortly, but you'll see on screen a news article that's recently popped up. Now, I definitely wouldn't have voted for the Telegraph as being the news website of the year, but hey, no one's asked me. But they recently ran this story that two-thirds of new docs are now from overseas. And I suppose it's on the background of publishing such nuanced pieces of journalism as this, that failure to train sort of our own doctors is putting patients at risk. Now, if you take a quick look at this guy's sort of publication history, it probably gives you a fair indication of his type, so to speak. But I suppose even so, his views aren't necessarily so fringe. So, who are these foreign doctors coming over here? And importantly, why is NHS Tayside paying a busy acute physician such as myself and an even busier GP such as Babar to spend an afternoon a week looking after these IMGs? So I'm going to hand you over to Babar.
Thanks very much, Achyut. Thanks everyone for coming in. So my name is Babar. I am a GP, as Achyut just said, and together the both of us work within the department or the Directorate of Medical Education alongside an amazing team that we'll talk about shortly. And we are all about IMGs. Now the big question is, and every time I do this with junior doctors, you'd be surprised at how many people actually don't know what an IMG is, which doesn't annoy me in the least, but it does highlight to me that we need to know who these people are. They're certainly not just another foreign doctor. An IMG is a medical doctor with a PMQ, that's a fancy term. In simple terms, if your qualification is from outside the UK, you will be classed as an IMG. Now, this is obviously the UK specific definition. If you were to go practice across in the States and your qualification is from outside the United States, you would class as an IMG there. So that is what we're all about, and that is who we're looking after, and that's what we'll be talking about. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw in a few scenarios because we love scenarios in medicine, don't we? I'm going to throw these random scenarios at you, and I'm going to get you to start thinking about this. So you've somehow hit jackpot and you've got an amazing research fellow job in Tokyo in Japan. I'm slightly envious, but there we go. And your department head has said, right, let's go out for dinner. An amazing sushi spread awaits you, and you go and you have the meal. And here's your dilemma. What are you doing at the end of the meal? Are you paying for the meal yourself because you're so thankful to your departmental head? Or actually, do you split the bill? Or should you just let your boss pay for the meal? Or should you just let them pay for the meal and you're paying for the tip? Now, that is just one meal, guys. And I'm not going to ask you guys to come up with the right answers. That is not a multiple choice question because I, for the life of me, do not know the answer. Neither does Achyut. But the bottom line being, it does have you thinking, doesn't it? It's not the fact that you have a medical degree or a nursing degree or whatever qualification you is. The fact that you've been taken out of your comfort zone and thrown into a culture which is entirely foreign and alien to you in a lot of ways does not make life easier. So let's fast forward and take you to another country. And this time around, we're taking you to lovely India. And you're now in Jaipur. Lucky you again. And this time, you've got a wee 7-year-old girl who's coming with a high fever. She's got a bit of a headache. She's got this pain behind her eyes and bleeding gums. They speak reasonable English, but you don't have an interpreter there with you. But you're kind of using good old sign language. You can see the bleeding gums, and they're pointing to the head, and she's flushed. And now you're starting to think, what in the world is this? Is this leishmaniasis? Is this yellow fever? Is this dengue? Is this chikungunya? What is this? And again, this time it's not a social situation. And you are a qualified doctor and you've got the degree and you did attend all the lectures on infectious diseases. But health changes not just from country to country, it changes from county to county, really. And we know that the demographics, we know that the pathophysiologies, etc., vary so quickly geographically. So once again, you're caught out by something that you know about, but actually you've not really practiced because of where you have trained. And suddenly you're in a dilemma. And let's just take you now straight across to Riyadh. And this time you've got an elderly gentleman who's got metastatic bowel cancer. And unfortunately, he comes in with a severe pneumonia. And he appears to be indicating that he just wants you to let him go home. Now, what do we do? Is there such a thing as a DNA CPR? Because certainly when we trained in the UK, that's what we were told about. Does that apply in Saudi? Or should we still come in CPR? Am I okay to speak to the family or am I not okay to speak to the family? And I need to potentially refer him, do I? Is there a standard pathway or do they have primary care? Is there a GP who actually looks after it or is there a hospice? And actually, now that I speak to his family, I hope to God they speak English because Arabic isn't my first language, and I certainly have to give them a really, really, really good account of what is happening because this is probably the most serious conversation their family will have. And I need to have that conversation in a language which is my second language. So, there, hopefully, that's given you the complexity of the problem. That has hopefully given you an understanding of what our IMGs go through on a daily basis. Let's just stop everything and for a second, again, close your eyes. And your cameras are off, so you're fine if you don't actually close them. I'll imagine you closing your eyes. But here's my ask of you. Suddenly, you have decided that you're relocating to any country in the world, and it doesn't have to be Saudi Arabia, it doesn't have to be Japan or India. You don't have to be a doctor, whatever profession you are, you're moving. Now, think of all the things that you have to pack up in your life and move, and then think of how difficult it must be to start from scratch. And that's not just professionally, guys, that is socially, that's in terms of your identity, that's in terms of your social networks, that's in terms of recognizing who other people are. And all through that, you have to smile because if you don't, you might just be reported to the GMC, or if not that, you'll definitely be reported to your supervisor, or if not that, someone will have a session about you in the coffee saying, he's a bit unfriendly, isn't he? So that's all I want you guys to think about as we talk about our colleagues. On the flip side, if someone does decide to come to the UK, the journey is not straightforward. I'm not going to bore you with everything. The slide is pretty much self-explanatory, but as a rule of thumb, you have to do an English language exam, which costs a mere £220 to £295. You then have to do a PLAB 1 exam, which thankfully we run in, I think off the top of my head, the last time I checked, in 6 different countries internationally. So if you're lucky and it runs in your country, great. If not, you have to travel for that. And that's another £268. The PLAB 2 exam is a mere £981, not an issue at all. And that only runs in the UK. So for that, you have to apply for a UK visa. You have to pay for the fare. You have to attend a coaching course. And then obviously you can't live on the street, can you? So sadly, you have to pay for accommodation costs. And then you pay for your GMC registration. And then you apply for a work visa. And if you are from a country where TB is endemic, you apply for a TB clearance certificate. And then all family members that are coming with you, your wife, your kids, whoever's coming with you, have to pay for the exact same visa fees. And then you hop on a plane and come across and you pay the same fares for your family. So in total, you're paying about circa £5,000 just to get here and start working. Now, £5,000 blows my mind. I don't want to talk about my bank account statement because you'll judge me for my financial acumen. But that is sterlings that we're talking about. If we're talking about Egyptian pounds, that's 314,913 Egyptian pounds, or it's 520. That's 500,000 Indian rupees. Can you picture that money, and can you picture how seismic that is going to be for these people? And I could continue to convert into any currency that you want. But just remember, it takes about 5 grand. And that's on top of all the costs of your medical degree back home. But is it all about the money? Because surely it's not always all about the money. What about all the other costs? So remember, you still need a house when you come in, right? Or an apartment. And good luck finding one in Dundee. We know what the property market is like. But it's not just that. It's easy for me to say, yeah, just get an apartment. But I remember when I landed in this country, I went up to an estate agent and I said, I'm a doctor. I want an apartment. And I thought they'll say, amazing, great. You'll be the best tenant ever. But no, I needed a reference. Now, where the hell do I get a reference from? Because I've just landed in this country. I know no one. And then they wanted my financial history. Don't have any of that. Um, and then I need to drive. But hold on, my driving license means nothing. So I have to apply for another driving license and sit the driving test. Until then, I have to jump on a bus, even if I am doing crazy bunker shifts through the snow. And then, believe it or not, if you go to a bank, they will not give you an account unless they've got a million letters to confirm who you are, where you're employed, etc. And then you have to understand the amazing tax system in the UK, which I still don't understand. You have to get yourself a phone. Good luck trying to get a phone contract. If you don't have anything, so of course you just have to buy one and get a pay-as-you-go SIM initially. And then you have to get your head around medical indemnity and the Royal Colleges and all that jazz that is almost second nature to us. That's the tip of the iceberg. Remember, we've still got the healthcare system to understand. So that is a slightly paler version of me basically shouting out in agony with a slightly unruly beard. But we don't understand the overarching structure because I was taught medicine in my country, but no one told me that primary care speaks to secondary care like that. No one told me that if you need an ambulance, you basically phone a dedicated ambulance line for SAS. And by the way, SAS stands for Scottish Ambulance Service. And then there is a structure called the GMC. And then there's another structure called the BMA. The doctors have a union? That's unimaginable, but yeah, that's normal for the UK. It wasn't for me in my home country. And then there's about 1 million Royal Colleges, and then there's health boards. And oh, hold on, there's health and social care partnerships. And then there's all this training terminology. There's a ES, and then there's a CS, and then there's NES, and then there's an e-portfolio. None of that is taught to me in any of the course I do. I could be a Harvard graduate, but none of that is taught to me. So all of that is difficult, including all the drug names, including all the formulary stuff, etc., etc. And you're thinking, hold on, have these guys not done the PLAB exam? The PLAB exam does not cover that. So that are things that we are expected to learn on the job or while we're managing risk and looking after life and death situations. So there's another strand to it, and this is the strand which is very peculiar to where we are, and this is the cartoonized worries that we have. So if we move on to the next slide, and we'll talk about all the social issues that we have that when we move across. I might say Ken all the time now, much to the annoyance of my English wife. But it took me a good while to figure out that good old Ken was not a man. And we don't understand the food and the humor and the geography. How was I supposed to know that Angus is actually attached to Dunby City, and then Perthshire is another big area, but they're all lumped together as NHS Tayside because the PLAB exam does not have a geography lesson in it, I can assure you. And when people are stood around coffee talking about how amazing the last episode of Strictly Come Dancing was, we don't have a clue about that, do we? And then they talk about how the SNP is saying that and how Labour is saying that. Pass, who's that? And then a lot of us can come from countries that have state religions. We might have a state religion in Scotland, but then a lot of people are not religious, and is everything tainted in a religious manner? A lot of medicine that is taught is very, very, very non-religious, but in a lot of countries, religion is almost as important as medicine, and your patients want that. But then there's education systems. As a GP, if someone comes to me and says, my vehicle is in S1 or P3. As a GP trainee, I didn't know what that was. I didn't have kids of my own. So I actually sat down and asked my trainer to talk me through the Scottish education system because I don't have a clue, do I? And then what is with this obsession with football? We're not going to win it, guys. Just get over it. But again, it took me a while to figure that out. And I've said it out loud and I shouldn't say it. And I've just suddenly made you all hate me. But there, it takes a wee while, right, guys? So that in itself is the journey of an IMG in a nutshell. Um, that's all going in the back of our guys. I trivialize it, I joke about it, we laugh about it. It's all good fun, but the bottom line is we all do this with a smile while trying to provide top-notch, assured medical care while ticking off all the boxes in our training, while keeping everyone happy, while keeping every staff member happy, while keeping every patient happy. And in the background, we are this big, massive iceberg where we are thrashing about like anything. And again, as we'll talk about the workforce quite nicely, you'd be surprised how many of us are out there. So go on, Achyut, tell us a bit about what the GMC's workforce report says.
Yeah, thanks, Babar. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your experience as well. But that opening headline from the Tory graph I shared at the start, I mean, that came from the 2024 workforce report from the GMC that was just published a couple of weeks ago. And you may have seen headlines from last year that just over half of new joiners were IMGs. The latest data is actually two-thirds now. And if we drill down into what jobs IMGs are generally moving into, just over half of those starting GP training are IMGs new to the UK. But the biggest expansion is in locally employed, clinical fellow type posts that don't always come with supervision and guidance in the same way that training posts do. So really, is it any wonder that our IMGs feel underprepared and undervalued, and I suppose worse still, discriminated against? The phenomenon of differential attainment, that's been something that's been long recognized. That's essentially that achievement gap in exam pass rates, recruitment, ARC-P outcomes between different groups. And the gutter press would have you think it's down to the incompetence of foreigners in comparison to, the great British doctors. But even amongst UK trained docs, there's a clear skin color differential in exam pass rates. So unless you subscribe to Linnaean belief of racial categories and characteristics, there's probably something more systemic going on rather than just individual innate factors, isn't there? And beyond achievement, there's also that phenomenon of disproportionate referrals to the GMC and ultimately disproportionate sanctions, like being removed from the register. But what the press don't report is that the proportion of referrals from the public is not significantly different for BAME UK graduates or IMGs or white UK graduates. So, besides Daily Mail readers, maybe most people are not particularly bothered by foreign doctors, or at least no more so than the rest of the docs. But the big difference lies in the proportion referred by their employers. So, what's going on there? So, this report from the GMC from 2019 dug a little bit more into that and found that really at the heart of that problem was inadequate onboarding and integration into the team with a lack of early ongoing supervision and mentorship. So it's not really just a matter of being able to speak proper. And interestingly, that previous article from September 24 was pretty much the same as this one from June 2010, except the reporter seems to have slightly refined his own language. Now, if you actually look at the left-leaning press, they at the same time they were kind of delicately wondering about whether IMGs should face an induction. Like that's a bad thing. So I suppose somewhat depressingly, perhaps unsurprisingly, it's taken another 10 years before this program for welcoming and valuing international medical graduates was launched in 2022. Now, this program did just cover England and Wales, but it clearly laid out what responsibilities employers had to the IMGs that they were recruiting to help bolster their services. Now, it's really worth pointing out, actually, that the year before that, Scotland did launch its own initiative, the Soft Landing Safer Care. Um, And essentially, that was designed to help trainers identify and meet the specific needs of those new to the country and our healthcare system. And this QR code will take you to the infographic that really nicely lays out what new start IMGs should expect in terms of their ongoing sort of onboarding and ongoing support. Now, essentially, there's this softer landing period, a minimum of 2 weeks for those new to the NHS, when they shouldn't be allocated solo out of hours on call work, but should be allowed that period of shadowing and then supernumerary work. And during this time, they should meet with their supervisor, who undertakes the structured softer landing needs assessment, arranging whatever support is required. And importantly, at the end of that softer landing period, undertake some form of rota readiness check before that person, unfortunately, before that person is put onto solo out of hours on call work. So besides that kind of, well, kind of that really important bespoke one-to-one support, in Tayside, we've got a team that support our IMGs, that provide that board level IMG specific induction, as well as that program of ongoing support. So supporting me and Babar as ADMEs, there's Fiona, our very, very able admin support. And then each year we have a group of clinical teaching fellows. So I say group. So last year we started with one. This year it's expanded hugely, but really capable people who are so interested in driving this forward by sort of developing new ways of teaching and training through sim. And I'm going to be talking about that shortly. But that onboarding process, it starts pre-arrival really, with info focused on the practicalities of settling into life in Tayside. Easiest ways of getting a local bank account, best place to get provisions, place of worship, etc. All based on FAQs and tips from previous IMGs. We've also responded to issues that cropped up with earlier cohorts. So we now emphasize the need to register with the local GP and seek medical indemnity cover, things that we assumed people would know but didn't. But what we also do is we link people into a WhatsApp group that connects our new docs to IMGs from the years before. So allowing them to ask and answer each other's questions, share their experiences and advice. And it's also a great way of just arranging get-togethers, meals out, potluck parties that really help build those bonds within the group, but also bridges out to others. I'll hand you over to Barbara now to take us through our enhanced induction.
Thank you, Achyut. So that's what we do in the background, and then the IMGs finally arrive, and it is time for them to start off with their new shifts, and that's when we step in formally to run the enhanced induction for IMGs. Now, this is a 4-day program, which generally starts in week 2 after changeover. So it runs in August and February. Okay, and this is all specialities across NHS Tayside, whether you're in a training post or whether you're locally employed. Okay. And these 4 days, and I'll break them down for you, they're simulation based, but there is a lot of software teaching happening there in the background as well. On top of that, we usually have the new Wednesday, which is welcoming IMGs new to Scotland, which is run by Nez, and that serves as the 5th day of the bespoke IMG induction program. So if we go into the next slide, I'll tell you who needs to attend. So if you've got an IMG colleague with you, if you're a supervisor, it's really important. If you're a manager, this is really important. If you're a rota coordinator, it's even more important. So remember, it's mandatory for anyone who has less than 6 months experience of the NHS. So if you know you've got a colleague in your department, or you've got a trainee who basically falls into that category, or even if it's a non-trainee, please make sure they attend these 4 days because they are exclusively ran for them. Now, those who've got 6 to 12 months of NHS experience, but they've not previously attended a bespoke induction, it is desirable for them to attend as well. Those who've had more than 12 months of experience, but not previously attended, for them, it is optional and it's service dependent. If the service can spare them, great, that would be ideal. If not, then we would hope that their previous experience would hopefully help them embed into the NHS. So what do we cover then in these 4 days? Because 4 days, you could argue, is quite a bit. Actually, it's not a bit at all. The 4 days fly by because we actually have to cover so much ground. So day one is introductions, a lot of heart to heart kind of shared experiences, reflections. The one thing that we do is we talk about where you are really from, and we get people to start connecting and knowing one another because that's what you need. So again, think of yourself out, dare I say, in somewhere in the south of Spain. And the minute you see a fellow Scot, you're like, oh, this person, I know them. Yeah. So there is that kind of immediate connection that you have. So we try and develop those connections. And then we start talking about the non-technical skills. So things like teamwork, things like language, things like communication skills, which are very UK and NHS specific, and they're very culturally sensitive as well. We talk about handovers, how to do that, and then we launch them straight into clinical simulation, including primary care. And that's not because we're promoting primary care exclusively or because I'm a GP. It's because we want the system to work well across the interface. So someone who works in the hospital needs to know how GP works and vice versa. Day two, we then start talking about the medical legal stuff. And the GMC have been great, and they've been coming attending this, and they've been presenting what is the welcome to the UK package, which Achyut will talk about slightly later on. But basically, we start to get them thinking about things like DNA CPR and adults with incapacity forum. What is a power of attorney? Who is the next of kin? All of that stuff, which actually is really, really important and often is the commonest cause of complaints, shall I say. So it's really important. And all the simulation on day two is based on looking after a deteriorating patient and speaking to families and having that chat so people start to feel more comfortable. Day three, we start introducing them to the structure of the NHS, explain to them what the MDT is, because the MDT, believe it or not, is again a very, very UK specific concept. Other countries have MDTs, but the roles within the MDTs are significantly different. We are routinely told about how the structure of the nursing profession versus the medical profession is quite different, as is the allied healthcare professionals. And they're all really integral to us here in the NHS. And we want all our IMGs to know about that. And then we start talking about things like discharge planning. We do a board round. So really, really practical stuff circled on teamwork. And then finally, day four is when we start talking about career management and support and ongoing planning, telling them who to turn to if they need help, telling them who is running their program, identifying people who they can turn to for help, telling them what an appraisal is, telling them what the portfolio is. Obviously, it's a very, very soft touch kind of rushed introduction to everything, but we just want to get them started like that. And then all of the simulation is based on medical emergency because we want the IMGs to be safe and feel safe in the context of a medical emergency, because that is where things can often go wrong. And then the best part of it is we try and squeeze in a meal out, which is amazing. But that is, again, great for us to kind of socially bond and connect. So how do we run these days? What is the feedback? What do IMGs say about this? Tell us about it, Achyut.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So, I mean, I have to be honest with you, I can't take credit for it. And Babar was involved in the Bridges Refugee Doctors Program, which is pretty much what we lifted this simulation-based program from. So, it was a well-established program, really evidence-based with great feedback already. So, we're just enjoying the benefits of that, really. So, whenever I run sessions, I'm partial to asking these three questions, which are loosely based on the Kirkpatrick model of evaluation. So, first of all, did you enjoy the session? Secondly, do you feel you've learned something? If so, what? And probably most importantly, do you think you're going to do something differently as a result? Again, if so, what? So, in the short term, this is probably going to be one way we can demonstrate our impact in terms of learning and behavior change. But I suppose we're also looking into, how many people are deemed to be rota ready at the end of this enhanced induction period. I suppose the ultimate aim might be closing that gap of differential attainment and hopefully disproportionate referrals to the GMC. But actually, ultimately, our aim is just to allow new start IMGs to thrive, just by lightening that load that they have every day of just trying to get with the way things are done around here. So when we look at the specific feedback, I mean, there's lots and lots of positives, particularly around how the day's structured. Getting to know, as Barbara said, the broader MDT, opportunity to talk through the challenges in that sort of safe space, and that's something that you can't underestimate. And one of the reasons why we opted not to record these sessions, so people can just open up and really be honest with each other. And partly the reason why we want people who have not had the chance to attend because of delayed start through visa or whatever to be able to join the next round. Because we don't quite yet have that bit sorted, which will come through shortly. Great suggestions of what we could do more, better of, such as getting people to actually fill in forms and use IT test system environments, which our clinical teaching fellows will be integrating into the next run, the February 25 run through use of more innovative sim. And Barbara mentioned this, the Wednesday. So this year, NES piloted a new national day that was delivered regionally that invited both the new start IMGs and their supervisors to come and sort of jumpstart that relationship. Now, it was based on the well-established GP STEP program, which has already been a great success, and the day was a success again. So those will be continuing 6 monthly, but they kind of took that bigger, broader view of looking at that kind of socio-cultural integration piece that Baba was talking about, factors around how to succeed, how you can link in with not just your supervisor, but other mentors in that kind of non-supervisory role, how you can link in with your peers, so you have that broad social connections and integrate well, how you can keep yourself well through, through broader health and well-being. And an important piece around intercultural competence, which I'll come back to. So in terms of running this 6 monthly, we already have our dates for February 25 all set. So generally Thursdays of the month. We've made it Tuesday the 11th because I was going to take Thursday the 13th off for the for Valentine's Day weekend. But generally Thursdays starting from week 2 to week 6. So 5 days over 5 weeks, incorporating the NES Wednesday for that first August and February changeover. So if you're a service lead, supervisor, rota coordinator, you'll be getting emails from the DME's office with those dates, but ones to watch out for. So that ongoing support is really provided through our monthly Sim Club sessions that follow on from the enhanced induction program. And we run them on the last Thursday of the month. So after August, after February, I'm talking about September, October, November. We skip December, obviously, because of the holiday bits, and pick up in January again. And then after the February run, March, April, May, June, and again skip July because of the holidays. So they're a full afternoon run at the Nine Wells Clinical Skills Centre and cover a variety of topics, generally triggered by whatever our IMGs have been finding challenging, or indeed actually if supervisors saying, like you to work on this element. So it is responsive. We are looking at how we can create a bit more of a structure around it, but it is very responsive to whatever is needed at the time. Now, in terms of attendance, I think we still keep that same criteria. So if you're less than 6 months NHS experience, you really should be attending these ongoing support sessions for at least that first 6 months. 6 to 12, desirable beyond that, depending on service. So the next session is going to be Thursday, the 30th of January. Now, with each of these, we've been relying quite a bit on our social platforms like our IMG WhatsApp group to advertise. Quite nicely, the November and January sessions generally coincide with St Andrew's Day and then Burns Night, which provides excellent opportunities to kind of explore things around language and culture a little bit more. So, introducing our docs to staples like Tunnock's tea cakes, iron brew, as well as haggis, albeit veggie. Though I did actually manage to find a butcher that does halal haggis in case anyone's interested and wants to sample next time around. But what we've been really doing over the last year is developing what we can offer supervisors of IMGs, really to help raise awareness and understanding of the unique challenges that our IMGs face, and sort of equip our supervisors to better support our IMGs as they transition into UK practice and importantly progress through it. So NES run this, well, at least one annual online workshop, which allows a kind of an introduction into the challenges. But they've also started running sort of deeper dive workshops into how to deliver more open, honest feedback in sensitive settings. So the trainer development collaborative, if you go onto the NES website and have a look, you can get through there. But in Tayside, earlier this year, we partnered with someone from the GMC to run a pilot workshop for supervisors of IMGs. And one of my main takeaways from that session was this tool I've linked to in the QR code. So it's published in the Harvard Business Review, and it allows you to examine your own preferences around workplace interactions along 8 dimensions about how you give instructions, how you receive feedback, how you disagree, how you timekeep, the various things like that, and compare them to others. And it's can be particularly useful between supervisor and trainee, and to the average of different cultures. And obviously being a second generation person, I kind of fall between UK, India, and it's quite an eye opener and actually helped avert some arguments between my folks and I over the recent holidays. So actually, if you go through there, answering those 30 questions allows you just as individuals to get a really good feel of where your own preferences lie compared to our own cultural norms and see how far apart, those bell curves of different distributions can lie between cultures. So when our IMG starts, I suggest that they go and rate themselves against their own countries and then against the UK and see where they lie. Oftentimes it can sometimes fall in between the nature of people that sort of moving from place to place. And then once they've met with their supervisors, then actually good way of getting that conversation going is suggest their supervisors take the test. And yeah, it's a good way of bringing people together and just recognizing those differences. So yeah, a recommendation. So another excellent resource that's available is this guide to supervising IMGs in Scotland, initially developed by Dr. Laura McGregor as an emergency physician from Lanarkshire, which she then generously sort of generic for use across Scotland. Now, I spoke to Laura at a meeting yesterday, and she's planning to do a refresh. So what I'll do is I'll share via the DME contacts once the refresh is done, rather than putting last year's version in the chat. That meeting I saw Laura at was at this group, the Scottish Regions IMG Support Network group. So over the last couple of years, IMG leads from each of the health boards have been coming together to share and spread best practice across Scotland, and I chair that group. And besides sharing experiences, ideas, resources, what we wanted to do is create a strategy for Scotland to better support our new Start IMGs. So we produced this. It was a consensus statement as to the essential and desirable standards for IMGs joining our workplaces and contributing to our workforce. So whilst IMG specific induction is an essential, simulation-based programs like ours are a desirable. I mean, the ones that have been commended by Scottish Government as a gold standard, and a role I'd recently taken up with at the Sim Centre in Larbert is around seeing what we could do nationally around IMG Sim. So hopefully joining the dots together again and pushing things like this across Scotland to really raise the bar. However, one essential standard I can't put my hand on my heart and say we're meeting in Tayside is this. It's that softer landing period. Just throwing people in at the deep end just is not okay. For employing doctors new to the country to keep our system afloat, we owe them a duty of care. So work here for me and Babar to sort of do, but we made great inroads from where we were just a year ago, but we need to keep this going. Now, the desirable section is where I think we can actually really raise the bar, and I think might make for really good conversation at the end of this. But I'm hoping this part of the document will be a live list, essentially highlighting examples of good practice that we should be adopting across Scotland. One topic that's been really hot, or one thing that's been a really hot topic of conversation at the Sing meetings has been around the practicalities and financing of that softer landing period. Ongoing discussions, but the general feeling, it should be similar to the way F1 shadowing is funded centrally, but ongoing discussions. The second around accommodation and financial support has generated a lot of debate in our own HR department and something we're still working on, but it's something that Babar and I do feel strongly about. Coming to a new country is hard enough without throwing financial hardship into the mix. And other places like Fife have managed to do this well. So, I think we need to work on that. So other developments include, championing, well, IMG champions, chief residents that we could be adopting to sort of push people into leadership roles and make the most of all this great talent that we've got coming in. So just one final signpost before I hand you back to Babar is this sort of suite of resources that NES have recently produced for new IMGs as well as their employers. So if you go to that QR code, follow the link. But Babar, I'll hand you back over to talk about where we're going next with all of this.
Thank you very much, Achyut. So I am very aware of time, so I'm going to give you a quick kind of snapshot of what is coming next. And basically what we're trying to do is we recognize primarily that while we've been working so hard with our IMGs, the IMGs work in an environment, and that environment is all of you. So we need to work together to make sure that the environment is suited to these guys, which is why we're speaking to all of you today. Yes, it's great to speak to all of you, but there is honestly an ulterior motive behind it. And that ulterior motive is the fact we want all of you to recognize what is happening around you. In the same, I'm hoping to speak to the F1s and the F2s in the next month. And again, the idea of that is to tell them all about the colleagues that they're working with, all the personal stories that we often don't know about because we just are often too scared to ask people what is happening in their personal lives, because God forbid we do that, because that would be nosy, right? But people want to be supported and helped, and we're all colleagues and we're all here to help and support one another. We're hoping to run an IMG supervisors workshop in January. We are hoping to start running workshops where supervisors can bring in their challenging IMG cases to us, and none of them are challenging. They're just challenging because there's issues around cultural competency. That's literally all it is, and it's almost kind of untangling that, and voila, you've got an outcome. We really want to develop and build our pre-arrival resource. So we start before they even come here, because that's where it should start, because they've got so much catching up to do on. And then we're slowly hoping to build up relations across stateside with other organizations, with Royal Colleges, utilize the social media networks that we have, and then hopefully build on individual tailored support for those of our IMGs who could potentially be struggling. And that's not just academically or professionally, that is in terms of support that they might need going forward. So, believe it or not, that brings us to the end of things, and I'm going to put up our I was going to say websites, our emails there. But before I open the floor to questions, I'm just going to kind of make a final plug to all of you. And it's basically building on what Achyut said a wee while ago there. And that was around the fact that the bottom line is, whether you're aware of it or not, 2/3 of the workforce is IMGs, or 2/3 of the workforce that is joining the GMC is IMG. So you will be working alongside IMGs. But what's even more important is, and that's a bit that I always think about, is your family members will be seen by these colleagues who are IMGs, right? And that includes your parents, your loved ones, your kids, all of them. And the bottom line is, if we don't help support these guys, they're not going to flourish. And if they're not going to flourish, we're all going to suffer, because we're all in it together. And the least we can all do is help pull each other up, because that is literally what we need to do. So in my dream world and in Achyut's dream world, we are all allies of IMGs, and we all support them, because not only are they someone who we work with, they are someone who helps support our families and our societies. And the bottom line also is, there's a lot of bottom lines, as you would have figured out, that it is actually really, really easy to do. We just have to be aware of it. I'll stop talking now. Thank you. Any questions, we'd be more than happy to take. We have managed to stop 12 minutes ahead, which is a record by mine Achyut standard, as you would have figured out. Slight tendency to talk a lot, the both of us. But equally, if there's something that you want to ask out with the forum of Zoom, shall we say, you can always reach out to us. We're more than happy to speak about all things IMG. Zoe, hello.
Hello, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Hear
loud
a
and
bit of an
clear.
echo. Yeah. Thank you. That was a really interesting talk. And we have had the privilege in my GP practice of having two fantastic IMGs as our ST1s over the past couple of years, and they're both going to be coming back to us in ST3. And I just wanted to comment, first of all, that the induction and I can't remember the acronym now, but the combined trainer-trainee induction was very well received. So I just wanted to let you know about that. And just also a couple of comments. I'm sure you're very aware of these challenges for our IMGs, but one big challenge, particularly in general practice, is driving and accessing driving lessons. I don't know if there's any way that we can kind of block book driving lesson time, because it's more arranging it that can be a big challenge for them. And also our two IMGs are male, and they have both come to the country with wives, and they've had young children. Their wives aren't working, and I'm just quite aware that they can be very isolated, and you know, it's the IMG's families as well. So one thing I'm aware of is particularly for Dundee areas, the Dundee International Women's Centre, which has loads of resources which might be of interest to IMG families. And the other thing I just wanted to comment on is that there's been a big change really since I trained in general practice a very long time ago now, but we used to have loads of social events as a trainee group. So it was easy. We did have some IMGs at the time. It was much easier for them to become integrated socially. And in fact, that is what happened within our group. We had IMGs who we got to know, and we socialized with them, and they very much became part of our friendship groups. And I see with our current IMGs that it seems to be very difficult for them to do that. They don't have these opportunities. And I know that's all down to funding, and these things are not happening for the trainees. But I do get the sense that it's difficult for them to form those social relationships with the trainee groups. That's what I see in general practice. I know you're probably very aware of that. I just wanted to put that comment across.
Thank you so much, Zoe. I'll come in on that, and then Achyut will come in as well to add on it. But you raise very, very, very valid points. I'm just going to quickly bash through it. So driving always comes up, always, always, always. We've never actually thought about what you've suggested, and it is a fascinating idea about kind of block booking and stuff. But believe it or not, it is something that often is almost top agenda on the WhatsApp group that we have for IMGs, where people recommend local driving instructors that they've used who actually are quite well suited. People have recommended driving instructors who are ethnic minority background themselves can actually speak the local language of the IMG, which they find quite useful. And then the ongoing IMG Sim Club that we have every month, we've actually spoken to the TPDs for general practice training, and they've confirmed that the GP trainees who are out in practice can claim study leave and come attend these in the hospital every month, each afternoon, each last Thursday afternoon. And in that, we again bring it up. So I think it was two IMG Sim Clubs ago that we did a quick chat about buying cars, what PCP is, what versus hire purchase, looking at cheap insurance for IMGs, all of that stuff. So that is something that we do definitely talk about in that sense. And hopefully we continue to develop things with ideas that you've said, like booking, etc. Around again the challenges of family members, yes, that is again something that we try and encourage through these social networks. So we've got this one big WhatsApp group, and then we've encouraged kind of offshoots of that. So there's a Tayside IMG Pakistani doctors group, and then there's a Tayside IMG Nigerian doctors group, and so forth. And we often try and connect people into these groups, the idea being we can't handhold them throughout, but we let them flourish within their own communities and within their own diasporas. And hopefully that allows them to make social connections within that. But the Dundee International Women's Centre that you've mentioned is a great idea. And that's probably something that we'll tap into as well. Social events, finally, funding, sadly, is an issue. But again, with my GP hat on and with my college hat on, the RCGP has literally, in the past 3 months, okayed the election of an IMG lead in each of its faculty areas. Tayside, or the East of Scotland, is currently recruiting their IMG lead for the faculty, and the idea is that the college, with its strand of funding, can start supporting with these social events, because the college does support social events. And again, I know that's very GP specific, but hopefully other specialities take lead within that context. But thank you for raising such valid points. Finally, I was one of those IMGs who the local graduates took on as a part of their family, and they made me one of their own, just through these social events, like you said. And that's why I am still in touch with them. That's why I still very much feel a part of the social fabric. So you've hit the nail on the head. Achyut, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, just on that point around our WhatsApp groups help develop those bonds between the groups. But really, the important thing is that bridging out to other groups and personal reflection. And coming from an Indian culture is very much about inviting to houses. And I've seen over the 20 years of my own practice that going out with your work colleagues has really dwindled to the point where it's, I'll reach out, I'll invite, and there's very little of in terms of people when they leave work just leave work. Whereas when IMGs are coming in new to the system, they actually really rely on those work connections. So, with somebody's ask offer, it's really important to help deal with that isolation. So as much as we can of trying to include people and actually, I suppose, making that effort of not just leaving work at 5 o'clock and then heading off, but just trying to include that new person as well. But it's hard. I know we've all got our competing demands.
Thanks, Zoe. Anyone else, any thoughts? You've still got 5 minutes, believe it or not.
Achyut, Babar, thank you so much for this. I apologize that I was not here at the beginning of the talk. I was stuck in a management meeting and ran down the stairs to discover that you'd already started. So I'm sure you cope admirably. But I did listen to the presentation. It was excellent, really excellent work that you've both invested a lot of time into, and you're clearly very passionate about this. So thank you very much for the presentation. There's no questions in the chat. And I can't see anybody's hands up, so I think that perhaps reflects that we need to get onto our afternoon clinics and be on with the rest of the day. Next week at Grand Rounds, the gynecologists will be here, and Kalpana Ragapathy is going to lead on that, talking about cervical screening, the update in cervical screening. For cervical cancer. I'm sure there'll be some chat about HPV and vaccines, but also about their award-winning roving cervical screening service that has been particularly successful across the whole of Tayside. So for today, thank you so much for your talk, Achyut, and for Babar. Thanks to everyone for attending, and I will see you for the last Grand Round of 2024 next week, same time, same place. Okay, take care, everyone, and thanks very much.